The Road to Oz by L. Frank Baum. Adapted by Peter Archer. Illustrations by Harry McNaught. Read for you by John H. Mayer. "Please, miss," said the Shaggy Man, "can you tell me the road to Butterfield? There are so many roads here. Seems to me a person could go most anywhere from this place." Dorothy turned around and gazed in surprise. She knew every road near Uncle Henry's Kansas farm. There were a good many roads here, more than she had ever seen before. She tried to count them, knowing there ought to be 5. But when she counted 17, she grew bewildered and stopped. "Dear me," said Dorothy, "I don't even know the way home. What are we going to do?" "Let's take the 7th road," the Shaggy Man suggested. 7 is a lucky number for little girls named Dorothy. So Dorothy counted 7 roads. The Shaggy Man started down the 7th, as if he was sure it was the best way to go. Dorothy and her dog Toto followed him. The 7th road was a good road, winding through flowery meadows and past shady groves of trees. As they walked, the Shaggy Man told Dorothy about the love magnet he owned, which made everyone who met him love him dearly. And Dorothy told the Shaggy Man about the amazing adventures she had had on visits to the fairyland of Oz. Darkness found them near a strange village inhabited by most elegantly dressed foxes. So they spent the first night as the guests of King Dox of Foxville, and he had a favor to ask of Dorothy. "You are quite an important personage," said the Fox King, "since the Princess Ozma of Oz made you her friend. I wonder if you would get me an invitation to her birthday celebration next week." "I'm sure Ozma would be glad to invite you if I asked her," Dorothy said, "but the land of Oz is a long way from Kansas." "Kansas!" the Fox King exclaimed. "You are closer to Oz than to Kansas right now." "Dear me!" exclaimed Dorothy. "Is this another fairy adventure?" "It seems to be," said the Fox King, smiling. The Fox King had a picnic lunch put up for them next day, and they bade him goodbye and were on their way. Soon they met a little girl, radiant and beautiful as a fairy, dancing gracefully in the middle of a lonely grove. She was Polychrome, a daughter of the rainbow, she explained. That morning she had slid down her father's bow, down to earth to explore, and he had suddenly lifted the bow and unknowingly left her behind. "Come with us," said Dorothy. "I'm going to try to find the fairyland of Oz. And if we can get there, I'm sure Princess Ozma will know a way to send you home to your father again." "Then I'll go with you," said Polychrome, and they started on once more. "It's getting awfully rough walking," said Dorothy as they trudged along. And indeed it was. At last they passed over the crest of a hill and saw before them a line of green trees with a strip of grass below. There they stopped for a delicious lunch. When they had feasted to their heart's content, they walked beyond the line of trees and saw before them a fearful, dismal desert of endless gray sand. At the edge of this awful waste was a sign. "All persons are warned not to venture upon this desert, for the deadly sands will turn any living flesh instantly into dust." "Oh," said Dorothy, "this is the deadly desert which surrounds the land of Oz." "Then we must cross it," said the Shaggy Man. "But how?" "I'm sure I don't know," said Dorothy despondently. "Can you do any magic, Polly?" "No, dear," answered Polychrome. "I'm sure I can't," said the little Kansas girl, and the Shaggy Man only has the love magnet, which can't help us much." "Don't be too sure of that, my dear," said the Shaggy Man, a smile on his face. He took from his pocket the love magnet. Holding the charm in the palm of his hand, he looked at it steadily and said these words: "Dear Johnny Dooit, come to me. I need you bad as bad can be." "Well, here I am," said a cheery voice. They quickly whirled around to find a funny little man sitting on a big copper chest, puffing smoke from a long-stemmed pipe. "What is it you need?" "We find we can't cross this desert to the land of Oz," said the Shaggy Man. Johnny Dooit puffed his pipe and looked carefully at the dreadful desert in front of them. "You must ride," he said briskly, "in a sand boat. I'll make you one." As he spoke, he unlocked the copper chest and lifted the lid. It was full of shining tools. As quick as a wink, he had seized an axe and felled a tree. Next, he sawed the trunk into long boards, nailed the boards together in the shape of a boat, and rigged up a mast and a sail. Then he slammed down the lid of the chest with a noise that made them wink. And while they were winking, Johnny disappeared, pipe, chest of tools, and all. They all climbed into the sand boat. The Shaggy Man raised the sail, and soon they were flying over the deadly desert so fast they could scarcely breathe. A row of jagged rocks loomed ahead in a dark line. They reached the far edge of the desert and bumped squarely into the rocks with a crash that sent them all bouncing onto the green grass beyond. "Well," said the Shaggy Man cheerfully, "we're here, wherever here may be." "We must be in the country of the Winkies," said Dorothy, "for the color of that country is yellow." Sure enough, the trees around bore yellowish blossoms. There were pretty yellow flowers bobbing among the grasses, and scattered over the countryside they could see cheery yellow farmhouses. "But I thought this was the land of Oz," said the Shaggy Man in a disappointed tone. "So it is," Dorothy explained, "but there are 4 parts to the land of Oz. The north country of the Gillikins is purple. The east country of the Munchkins is blue. Down at the south is the red country of the Quadlings. And here, in the west, is the yellow country of the Winkies. And the Emerald City is in the middle of Oz, where the corners of the 4 countries meet." They found a pleasant road to walk along, and at noon they stopped at one of the yellow farmhouses, where it delighted the farmer and his wife to give a good luncheon to Princess Ozma's friends. That night they spent in the handsome tin palace of the Tin Woodman, Emperor of the Winkies, and next day he accompanied them on their way. Soon they reached the high bridge over the broad river which flowed between the country of the Winkies and the Emerald City. From the top of the bridge, they could see far away across a green meadow the magnificent spires and splendid domes of the superb city, sparkling like jewels as they towered above the emerald walls. Polly was so pleased that she danced on ahead. But suddenly, she gave a start of terror, for beneath the trees came stalking 2 great beasts, either one big enough to crush the little daughter of the rainbow with one blow of his paws. One was a tawny lion, as tall as a horse, nearly. The other, a striped tiger, almost the same size. Polly was too frightened to scream or stir, but Dorothy rushed past her and with a glad cry threw her arms around the huge lion's neck. "Oh, I'm so glad to see you again, Cowardly Lion," cried the little Kansas girl. "And the Hungry Tiger, too. How fine you're both looking. Are you well and happy?" "We certainly are, Dorothy," answered the Cowardly Lion in a deep voice that sounded pleasant and kind. "We are greatly pleased that you have come to Ozma's party." The others now came up, and the lion and the tiger greeted them cordially. They were drawing behind them a splendid golden chariot, Ozma's own, and in this the little party rode through the jeweled gates and into the stately Emerald City of Oz. The chariot wound through charming streets, paved with green marble slabs, lined with buildings brilliant with gold and jewels. When they stopped, it was before a building so noble that even the Shaggy Man knew at once that it must be the royal palace. "Here we are!" cried Dorothy, jumping down. They were greeted by a crowd of gorgeous servants, all dressed in green, embroidered with silver, who escorted them to handsome rooms assigned to them. Dorothy had her own suite of rooms, and soon felt quite at home, but the Shaggy Man was not sure what his welcome would be. However, he was led to a handsome room, whose furniture was upholstered in cloth of gold. The coverlet upon the bed had designs of pearls and rubies sewed upon it, and there was a dressing room full of splendid new clothes, still as shaggy as the Shaggy Man's heart could wish. At last, all the guests met again in the splendid drawing-room of the palace, where lovely Princess Ozma herself waited to greet them. "Why didn't you send me word you were having a birthday party?" Dorothy asked when the greetings were over. "Didn't I?" asked Ozma with a merry smile. "Who do you imagine mixed up those roads to start you wandering toward Oz?" "Oh, I never suspected you of that," Dorothy had to admit. Just then, the Wizard of Oz was announced. After greeting Dorothy with much affection, he fell into conversation with the Shaggy Man, who admitted that he would like to live in the beautiful land of Oz. Ozma was consulted and happily agreed. Then those assembled went in to dinner, which you may imagine was a grand affair, and afterward the wizard did magic tricks. Next day, after breakfast, Ozma asked Princess Dorothy to receive the guests in the throne room as they arrived. The ruler herself was busy ordering the preparations for the morrow's festivities. Dorothy willingly agreed, so she went to the great throne room and sat in Ozma's seat, surrounded by her friends. Soon the royal guests began to arrive. First came a lively brass band, clearing the way for the famous Scarecrow of Oz, riding proudly on the back of a wooden sawhorse. The Scarecrow took his place beside the throne to greet the other guests. After a magnificent banquet, a gorgeous procession streamed out from the city to the meadow beyond the gates. There, a grandstand had been built before a great stage. And with the Wizard of Oz as master of ceremonies, all the Fairyland guests performed. At the close of a thrilling day-long celebration, the wizard announced the last act of all. He had invented a machine to blow huge soap bubbles toughened with glue. One by one, the guests from distant lands stepped upon the platform, and the wizard blew a big soap bubble around each of them. When each bubble was completed, it floated slowly upward, and the guests were blown safely home. Dorothy and Toto went last of all. She said her goodbyes to her friends of Oz. Then the bubble shut Dorothy snugly in, and away she flew on a friendly breeze, home from the land of Oz.